All right, take a look around. If
Hmm.
you've walked into a pharmacy, a grocery store, or frankly just opened social media in the last 48 hours, you know exactly what is happening.
Oh, you can't miss it. The world has been aggressively plastered in red foil, glitter, and just an alarming amount of heart-shaped chocolate.
It is February and the pressure is on.
It is the season of the red rose, and honestly, the immediate vibe shift is palpable. You can feel the collective anxiety about, doing it right, just hovering in the air.
You really can. And look, we all know the critique. It's a Hallmark holiday, it's performative, it's expensive. And I want to push past the cynicism for a second.
Okay.
This time of year actually forces us to confront something much messier than a box of chocolates. It forces us to look at how we talk about love. Because the vocabulary we use, it is wild.
It is completely different from even 20 years ago. We are seeing a massive sociological shift. We've moved from these very traditional, almost fairy tale idioms to a lexicon that is, I don't know, part tech slang, part therapy speak.
Or legal contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We are trying to navigate a world where you can be swept off your feet, but also end up in a situationship that has no clear exit strategy.
Right.
So, that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to unpack the evolution of this terminology. We're going to decode what it actually means to go from talking to tying the knot.
And to do that, we have a fascinating piece of source material today. We are analyzing a recorded dialogue between two observers, Alex and Sarah, and they're dissecting the modern dating landscape, but they're doing it through the lens of their friend, a woman referred to in the text as once young.
Which I have to say is a fantastic name. Once young.
It really is.
It sounds like a character in a fable or maybe a cautionary tale, but she seems to be a very real person with a very real, very long-term marriage.
She's kind of the control group in this experiment. Alex and Sarah are living in the modern chaos, and they use once young and her husband as the case study, the gold standard of what a sturdy relationship looks like.
So it lets us ask the big question. Is the modern vocabulary helping us, or is it just making us more confused?
I think that's the core of it.
So let's get into it. The source opens with a V-Day vibe check. Alex and Sarah are discussing the sheer weight of expectation for February 14th.
Right, the stress.
Alex admits it's a commercial holiday, sure, but he notes that the pressure to find the right gift is genuinely stressful. But then Sarah throws out a phrase that just stopped me. She talks about putting yourself out there.
Putting yourself out there. It is one of the most loaded phrases in the English language.
Usually when I hear that, I picture a single person, probably terrified, downloading a dating app or walking into a singles mixer. It implies you are on the market.
Right, you're hunting. It implies a state of lack. You are seeking something you don't have, so you expose yourself to rejection to get it.
But Sarah flips this concept entirely. She argues that putting yourself out there applies just as much to long-term couples.
Yeah, she mentions that once young and her husband, who have been married for years, still go on first dates.
Wait, unpack that. How do you go on a first date with someone you share a mortgage with?
It's about the mindset. I mean, think about a real first date. You are attentive, you are curious, you're trying to impress.
You're vulnerable.
You're vulnerable because you don't know if the other person is going to like you back. Sarah's suggesting that in a long-term marriage, we tend to get lazy. We stop putting ourselves out there because we assume the other person is locked in.
So we stop courting them.
We stop being vulnerable. We stop risking rejection. And it leads to stagnation. If once young and her husband are treating date night like a first date, it means they're actively trying to win each other over again and again.
That is a lot of work.
Well, relationships are a lot of work. That's the first lesson the source hits us with. But let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
Before we get to the maintenance phase, we have to talk about the acquisition phase. Because the source material spends a lot of time contrasting the once young era with the modern hellscape of dating.
The pre-situationship era.
It sounds like a mythical time. Alex mentions that once Young first got together with her partner, the term situationship didn't even exist.
Right.
Sarah notes that back then it was binary. You were either just talking or you were exclusive.
Okay, we have to dig into situationship because it feels like the defining word of our generation. The source defines it by its absence in the past. It's this gray area, more than friends, less than a relationship. But why? Why do we have this term now?
I think it's a reaction to the paradox of choice.
Meaning?
In the modern landscape, there is always someone else to swipe away. A situationship is a holding pattern. It allows you to have intimacy without the cost of commitment. It's safe. It's undefined.
But isn't that safety an illusion? Because
Yeah.
the source contrasts this with the term exclusive,
Yeah.
and they flag this as a specifically American obsession in this context. Exclusive.
It is very specific. In many cultures, if you're dating, it is just assumed you are only dating that person.
Sure.
In the U.S. context described here, exclusive is a distinct milestone. It is a declaration.
It's a subtractive process. You aren't saying, I love you yet. You're saying, I am removing all other options.
Exactly. It's a boundary setting. The source notes that once Young and her husband moved to the exclusive phase very quickly, they didn't linger in the talking stage.
They didn't get stuck in a situationship.
No, they made a choice to shut down the other options.
They locked it down, but then they hit a hurdle that the source describes as the ultimate test, the LDR.
A long-distance
The
relationship.
dreaded LDR. I feel like everyone has an opinion on these, and usually it's negative.
Right.
But Alex and Sarah discuss this with a lot of reverence. They mention that once Young and her husband survived a period of being long distance, and they argue that is specifically why their marriage is so solid now.
This is a really, really important psychological insight. Why is the LDR the ultimate test? It's not just because it's lonely.
No.
It's because it strips away the crutch of physical presence.
A crutch.
Think about it. When you are dating someone and you live in the same city, you can gloss over a lot of incompatibility with physical chemistry. You go to a movie, you have dinner, you hook up. You don't necessarily have to talk about the hard stuff.
Right. If you get in a fight, you can just hug it out.
Exactly. Physical proximity can mask emotional distance. But in an LDR, you don't have that luxury. If you want to connect, you have to use words. You have to build trust without seeing what the other person's doing on a Friday night.
So you're building emotional muscle.
You are building a foundation of communication that has nothing to do with physical touch. The source implies that once Young and her husband built this massive reservoir of trust during their LDR phase, so when they finally got back to the same zip code,
The hard work was already done.
it was done.
That makes total sense. They passed the test. Now, I want to pivot to the imagery the source uses, because this is where the language gets really visual. We have these physical idioms for falling in love, head over heels, and swept off her feet.
These are classics.
Yeah.
But we rarely stop to actually visualize them.
Well, Sarah in the text breaks it down. She says, head over heels creates a visual of someone just like tumbling through the air.
It's a disaster, really. If you are walking down the street and your head goes over your heels, you have fallen. You are out of control.
It implies that love is a chaotic force. It disorients you.
Totally. And sweeping someone off their feet is similar. Alex says, once Young's husband swept her off her feet. It sounds romantic, but again, it implies a loss of agency.
You aren't walking anymore. You are being carried.
It's very dramatic. It fits that new love energy, the dopamine rush, the obsession. But what I find really compelling in the source is how they contrast this falling imagery with the language of marriage. When they talk about the long-term commitment, the idiom shifts from falling to tying the knot.
Tying the knot. It's such a common phrase, but compared to head over heels, it's totally different physics.
Completely different. Head over heels is motion and chaos. Tying the knot is static, secure, and deliberate. You don't accidentally tie a knot. You have to sit down and do it.
Sarah explicitly calls it permanent and sturdy. She compares it to a rope.
And that fits the description of once Young's marriage. It's not about tumbling through the air anymore. It's about holding weight. A knot is designed to withstand tension. In fact, a good knot gets tighter when you pull on it.
That is a beautiful metaphor. The stress of life pulls on the relationship, and the knot just gets tighter.
But there is a bridge between the falling and the knot. The source briefly mentions he popped the question.
Popped the question. Another weird phrase when you think about it.
It is. It suggests something sudden, like a bubble bursting or a cork flying off. It's the inflection point. You go from the chaos of falling, where everything is popped and exciting, to the deliberate act of tying.
It's the moment you decide to stop falling and start building.
Precisely.
So once Young and her husband tied the knot. But the deep dive doesn't stop at the wedding. The source material spends a lot of time discussing the maintenance. How do they keep the knot from fraying?
And this brings us to the expectation versus reality of modern romance.
Yes. Alex and Sarah call once Young and her partner couple goals, which is high praise. But, and this is key, they aren't doing the things we usually see on Instagram as couple goals.
Right, they aren't on a yacht in the Maldives. They aren't
Yeah.
hiring skywriters.
The source explicitly rejects the grand gesture.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
We are conditioned by movies to think love is the boombox held outside the window.
Yeah.
The public declaration. But the source argues that for a long-term marriage, grand gestures are actually kind of suspect.
Suspect how?
Well, a grand gesture is often a performance. It's for an audience. Or sometimes it's an apology for a lack of day-to-day effort.
Ah, right, it's overcompensation. I ignored you all year, but here's a giant teddy bear.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that Once Young's version of couple goals is low-key, it's staying in, it's cooking a meal, and Sarah connects this directly to the concept of love languages.
The 5 love languages. We have quality time, acts of service, physical touch, receiving gifts, and words of affirmation. Sarah pinpoints specifically that Once Young values acts of service.
And this explains why the grand gesture doesn't work for her. Receiving gifts is a different language. Acts of service is about functionality.
It's the little things. The source says it's the little things that count when you've been together a long time.
Think about the nod imagery again. A nod isn't flashy, it's functional. Acts of service are the maintenance of that functionality. It's taking out the trash when it's raining so the other person doesn't have to.
It's making the coffee. It's boring, unglamorous work.
But it communicates, I see you, and I want to make your life easier. A skywriter says, look at me. An act of service says, I care about you. And for Once Young, that sustainable care is what makes the relationship last.
It's why they are couple goals, not because of the flash, but because of the function. Speaking of function, we have to talk about labels. We discussed exclusive, but what about what we call our spouse? The source draws a really sharp contrast between the old way and the new way.
The old way being the ball and chain.
I hate that phrase. It makes me cringe every time I hear it.
It should. It's incredibly revealing. If you refer to your spouse as the ball and chain, you are using the imagery of a prisoner. You are implying that marriage is a sentence, a loss of freedom.
A burden you have to drag around. It sets up an adversarial dynamic. It's me against my spouse.
Right. And the source notes that we have shifted away from that. We move to significant other, which Sarah calls gender neutral and professional.
It sounds a little corporate to me. This is my significant other.
It is a bit sterile, but it grants weight. It says this person matters. But Alex adds the really modern layer. He notes that people now use my person. Specifically, Once Young refers to her husband as her person.
My person. It's from Grey's Anatomy originally, right? But it's morphed into this broader term.
It has. And I think it's the most powerful label we have right now. It implies a deep, singular connection. In a world of 8 billion people, amidst all the noise and the situationships, I have identified this one human as my counterpart.
It feels like a team dynamic. Ball and chain is a prison. My person is a partnership.
It creates an us against the world mentality rather than a me against you mentality.
However, and this is a big however, the source also throws in a curveball about independence. Because if you get too wrapped up in my person, you risk losing yourself.
The danger of codependency.
Right. And this brings us to Valentine's Day.
February 13th. The holiday invented by Leslie Knope on Parks and Rec that somehow became a real cultural institution.
Ladies celebrating ladies. Sarah mentions in the text that she is going to a Galentine's brunch with Once Young, and she makes a point to say, even though she's married.
That is a critical observation. There is a cultural script that says once you tie the knot, you disappear into the marriage. You become a we.
The dreaded couple absorption, where you can't invite one without the other.
Exactly. But the source highlights that Once Young, who we've established as the gold standard of marriage, still prioritizes her female friendships. Sarah says this illustrates a healthy balance.
So Galentine's Day isn't just for single people.
Not at all. In fact, I'd argue it's more important for people in relationships. You have a significant other, yes, but you cannot ask one person to be your entire village.
Right.
You can't ask your husband to be your best friend, your therapist, your financial advisor, and your travel buddy all the time.
That's too much pressure on one knot.
It is. By celebrating Galentine's Day, Once Young is reinforcing her own identity. She is saying, I am a wife, but I am also a friend, and I am also an individual. That autonomy actually strengthens the marriage because she brings a whole happy person back home.
It goes back to that putting yourself out there concept we started with. You have to keep engaging with the world, not just your partner.
Exactly. If you retreat entirely into your marriage, the world shrinks. If you keep putting yourself out there with friends, with your spouse, the world stays big.
So we've tracked this whole journey. It's kind of exhausted me,
It's a
honestly.
fair journey.
We've gone from the anxiety of the situationship and the talking phase through the LDR test where we built our communication skills without physical crutches.
We fell head over heels, realized that was chaos, and decided to tie the knot for stability.
And we learned that keeping that knot tight requires acts of service, taking up the trash, not hiring skywriters, and maintaining our own identities so we don't become a ball and chain.
It really highlights that the idioms we use matter. Swept off her feet sounds effortless. Maintenance sounds like work. But the source is telling us that the work is where the actual love lives.
It's the difference between the wedding day and the marriage. The glitter versus the rope.
Precisely. And I think that's why the source emphasizes low-key celebrations. Because real love is often very low-key. It's found in the quiet, boring moments, not just the high-drama ones.
So, bringing this back to our listener, what is the takeaway here? Whether you are single, talking, or 50 years into a marriage.
I think it comes back to that initial challenge from Sarah. Putting yourself out there. It's easy to get complacent. It's easy to hide behind a label like married or single. But vulnerability is the currency of connection.
So if you're single, putting yourself out there means risking rejection.
And if you are married, it means risking rejection too. It means asking for what you need. It means trying to date your partner again. It means not taking the knot for granted.
I love that. Don't let the knot become a ball and chain. Keep it a lifeline.
That's the goal.
Well, look, whether you are celebrating with a significant other, hanging out with your friends for Galentine's, or just capitalizing on the half-price chocolate on February 15th.
Which is objectively the most logical way to celebrate.
It really is. We hope you find a connection that feels like a sturdy rope, not just a tumble through the air.
Well said.
Thanks for deep diving with us into the language of love. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.